All right. So in our last class, we were talking about the React.js. So we got uh, some few basics of it, but let us dig deeper into the structure of the React. So in the last session, we tried to install an application using create React app. So let me open the folder that we created before, the recent ones. So this was the application that we created, and it is a React application that we have. It is inside a folder called, it is a basic folder, sample React, and I have my project file, which is in my app. And if you look at the folder structure, we have node modules, public, src, jitignore, and a few files like this. So one of the very important thing that you need to understand when you're learning React.js is the structure of the code and how the structure is built, and also what is the purpose of each and every file. Normally, in most of the sessions or most of the courses, what we see is they just directly get started with creating some pages or creating some components. But that is not a right approach. First of all, you need to be able to relate this to JavaScript, because React itself is a advanced version of JavaScript. So you need to understand how does it, how these two are different. That is most important. That is so we will focus on it. So as we talked in our previous sessions, and we understood that JavaScript is pretty simple. It is a, you know, it is a scripting language for you, which will basically help you to build the client interfaces or client side interface, right? So let us try to understand the bigger picture here. So the bigger picture of React.js. So whenever you have a small person who's trying to access some application, so the first interaction that he's going to do is he's going to open a browser. So I have my browser opened, and your browser, as we discussed, consists of something called a V8 engine, which basically, understands JavaScript and controls it or translates it to the CPU. And then whichever code, the piece of code that you build, okay, you can open it through your browser, and this code would consist of your HTML plus CSS plus JS. So this is the basic structure of your, uh, you can call it as a web page, or you can call it as your web app, whatever. So this HTML, you can also call it as a view. This is something which gives you all the cosmetics that you have, and your JS gives you the functionality, right? But let's say my application is growing very faster. My application is like, becoming very bigger, and multiple people need to handle it. So what I'll do is I'll break this code into multiple chunks. And on what you may ask, on what basis are you going to break this code? It's pretty simple. I'm going to break this code based on the functionality that I have. So my single application, the application I have, let us say it is a food ordering application. So I have a search box, I have some component here which shows the list of restaurants. I have one section here which shows details about each and every restaurant. Again, it has a picture of a restaurant, a menu, and some buttons over here. Likewise, this is page number 1. Likewise, I have page number 2, which again consists of some elements. So on, you will have n number of pages, n number of elements, lot of information that you're going to show here, right? So means what? You will have n number of index.htmls. In our previous project, if you saw, or in the previous classes, if you saw, we have an index.html to which JavaScript is linked. I can have n number of index.htmls, likewise n number of JavaScript files. Means for each and every HTML file, or for each and every page, a page is nothing but your HTML. For each and every file and each and every page, you need to again create the JavaScript files, and then you need to create n number of CSS files. Okay, but the thing is, whenever you open an application, let's take the same Zomato's example. Whenever I'm opening Zomato, I'm just landing on Zomato India. So there is this first page that is coming in, which is embedding everything. Zomato, this is currently having everything inside it. If I go to restaurants in Nagpur, then it is the page got changed. If you observe, the URL got changed, and you have multiple options coming in. So these are all sub pages that you have, right? So there is a term for these items. So now what we will do is we will bring all the, see, let us say all these ends, let's say index page number 1, JavaScript page 1, and CSS. This belongs to one component. JavaScript, HTML to JavaScript to CSS to. Likewise, you're going to create a pack of, or a bundle of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS together. If you bundle all of these together, and you, let's say, if you are naming this chunk, this is called a component. Okay. So a small piece of HTML, let's say my small piece talks about a to-do list, for example, or if you take Zomato's example, I'm just talking about this particular box, which is saying the Opera House, for example. So this is a component which is having an image. It is showing that the discount is 20%, some name to it, rating to it. So here, if you observe, this information is not static. So if the complete information of Zomato is being static, no one uses it. There is no functionality associated to it. Correct? So what happens is you tend to break this HTML into multiple pieces. And if you see this percentage 20% off, I'm not going to, or this restaurant is not going to keep this 20% all the time. It might increase to 200, 50%, or it might come down to 10, or they might not even give any, discount at all. So this information is dynamic. This information changes. But in HTML, information is static. It is just a simple document, right? So means what? To this particular section that you're talking about, we have, so if you see, the structure is given by your HTML, the discount rating, the discount percentage, it is being changed by your JavaScript, and the styling to it, the little gray colored background or this rounded edges is given by your CSS. Now this is a component. So all this together is a component. Okay. So any, basically a component is not like it is some huge section of your page. It doesn't mean it. So even a small, even if you see, I'm sure Zomato will have a separate component just for this rating tab. And if you observe, the design for this particular rating tab is the same for each and every restaurant. I'm not going to write code for each and every restaurant, right? I don't ask my developer or my teammate to write this code for each and every restaurant. No. So what I do is I will repeat this component n number of times. To how many number of times I can repeat it or I can use it, I'm going to multiply it. Okay. But the information that is associated to this, the information that is going to come inside this particular component is going to change. Okay. So the key takeaway from here is the important point that you need to understand here is the components that you have. It is just a simple combination of your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, okay, fine. Now I have a small component, just like the one that we saw on Zomato. I have an image section. Let's just imagine that this is that component. There is some HTML. It talks about some XYZ information and A and B. Okay. Information means information is handled by your JavaScript again. So likewise, I want to repeat this component multiple times, just like the way Zomato is repeating the same. If you observe, same design, nothing changes, only your data is changing. Okay, the more data you feed in, and again, where is this data getting acquired from? Restaurants are going to give it. Restaurants are going to have one more application where they basically upload all the images. Zomato might not be taking care of the image quality. Probably they would set some standards key, the image should be of this size. You need to provide to a particular restaurant, let's say this Crustos. So they go to Crustos and say key, okay, every fortnight you need to update the discount that you're offering. So the data upload is happening directly at the restaurant, and that data is getting reflected or getting grabbed by the servers of Zomato, and you're basically showing that information here. So they are going to maintain the same or similar. So if you remember, we were talking about data structures. So if you again talk about a restaurant here, this restaurant is associated with an image, and a discount is one parameter which is on the top, I mean on the surface information. And the name of it, the type of cuisine or the dishes that it is offering. If you dig deeper into the restaurant, if you want to understand more about this restaurant, you end up looking at the complete menu, the location. So restaurant is associated with a lot of information here, so you have a restaurant class created for it. Okay, so two things. Number one, uh, in React or in any UI framework, you need to understand two things. How is my HTML going to be? Okay. And how is my JavaScript going to talk to this HTML? How these two are interacting together? This is one. And the CSS is anyway the design part. So you're going to apply design on the top of this HTML. We'll come to it. But majorly, the way we wrote HTML and JavaScript previously, just to recap, I'll show you the previous code that we wrote. I'll show you some differences here. If you see the previous code that we had, you have the JavaScript written completely in a different file, JS file, and you have your HTML written here. But if you observe, there was few places where you rendered your JavaScript or rendered your HTML. See, for example, see, you created one HTML element here. Likewise, you have created like multiple elements, appended one element to the other, right? So in React, what these people did was they basically brought HTML and JavaScript together. They basically mixed both of these, they made a cocktail out of it. So what is the benefit of doing this? What is the benefit of mixing these two together is what we will understand. So before that, you need to understand what is this JSX. Okay, so JSX is one important notation that you need to understand before even learning JavaScript. I'll just give you a small brief, and it is very easy to understand. So look at this small example. I have a JavaScript variable here, name Josh, and you have Josh Perez, and you have one element or a simple h1 tag in which, see, you just mentioned some curly braces, and inside that you wrote this variable. Then the output of this would be hello, comma, Josh Perez. Okay, so you tend to create, or you tend to add the JavaScript notation or the JavaScript code. You can write it inside the HTML tags. You didn't do that in your conventional or the actual JavaScript code, right? So basically, JSX offers you this facility to, write your JavaScript inside your HTML here. So if you, this is one more example. Executing this code and all, we will have a look. So don't worry. But yeah. So if you observe inside the curly braces, see, this is the place where they just declared a variable, or they just not declared, sorry. They just used a variable to display a variable. And here, if you see, he created an element. He just created a variable. Don't even look at it like HTML. He just created a variable, assigned it some HTML. Okay. Didn't we do the same here? We created some HTML here. See, document dot create element dot button means it created an HTML element and then assigned it to a variable. The same thing you're doing here. You created an element and assigned it. But inside this element, you have curly braces inside which you can write, you're basically calling a JavaScript function. If you see, this is a JavaScript function, right? This JavaScript function is this. So it calls this, and it can send the variable that you're declaring. Okay, so this notation is your JSX. Now, what is the benefit of it? Just imagine how much code you reduced, right? So with Angular, it is little different. In Angular, you will have a separate view file or a separate HTML file. But in React, you will have JSX files. It is not JS file. Previously, we saw JS file, HTML file, and CSS file. Now in React, what happens is you're going to combine these two. Now this becomes your JSX file plus CSS. If you remember, we were talking about TypeScript. So just go through TypeScript. I already discussed this in the last class. Just get some basics. I'm also going to talk about it eventually. Either JSX or TSX plus CSS. Okay. Let us say if you are creating a component, what you tend to do is this JSX plus CSS code, this will become a React component. I'll show you one example. Okay, this example we already installed in our local machine. See here. If I go to my, where is this project? Open recent. Look at this one. So here, they are not using any JSX file, but still you can convert it. So it's not a problem. But if you observe, I have an index.html page. If you see, just like my previous project, I have an index. Let me do one thing. I will open this in a new window. I'll start comparing with your conventional way of writing JavaScript. See, I have an index.html file in my to-do list application. Here I have an, forget about the folder structure, okay? Just focus on things that we bother about. Index.html I have, HTML, head, body, no difference, head, body, nothing changes. But here, there are few meta links that got added. This is not that significant at the moment. Don't worry about those items. But if you come, so there is a title tag. Here we have a title tag, I guess, mostly. Yeah, here you have a title tag, to-do list app. Here it is React app. If you go inside the body, you have a simple HTML. You have nothing. If you, yeah, just to show you what this application is, npm start. This is my application. Okay. It is running on localhost 3000, and that is the default server, default local server that gets created. And I have an image or a simple, I think this is some, let's see what this image type is. This is some GIF image that is attached, and I have some information coming in. Okay. So here in my index.html, I don't have any information. I just have something called div id root. I have a simple HTML division, and the ID of that division is root. Okay. So let me explain you this parallelly with a diagram. Okay, let us understand the structure. So just to summarize, before going to the next section, just to summarize, a component is a combination of your JS, HTML, and CSS. In order to, when you have these kind of scalable applications, you end up writing lots and lots of lines of code. So you need to have components divided, and yeah, if for every functionality or for every feature, you will have a separate component. Because if you see, just understand, you're a team of people who are working on Zomato. So one person cannot build everything, as we discussed. So some might focus on the index or the home page. Some might focus on only the design of your restaurant's page or the ordering section. Some would focus on payment section. So you're going to divide the project, and or based on the functionalities that you have, you're going to reassign it to multiple people, right? So here, if you see, if comparing it with the structure I have an index page. In this index page, I have a division called root. Okay, this is what you have here, root, a small division. Now where is, what exactly is happening? This is a static HTML, right? So what exactly is happening here is, internally, if you see, I'm now in SRC. In SRC, I am in index.js. If you look here, you're doing something here. You're trying to, sorry, 1 second. Hmm. So here you're trying to import React. Means, as you know, React is a separate library. You're taking the power of React, and you're importing something called React DOM. We will talk about this React DOM going further. So you did all the imports. So these are nothing but all your libraries or packages, packages that you have. Okay, these are all the packages. Here, if you see, there is this syntax that we need, this, which is going to be a little confusing here. So this syntax is something which talks about your, so if you just cut this down, does this look like a function? See, create root, all fine. And then you have one more function. Look at it, look at this like a function here again. Again, this is a function. We will try to understand what these functions are, okay? Let me clear these drawings, yeah. So you did all the inputs here till here, and then you created a small variable, and then you said React DOM. Now, what is this React DOM exactly? So you imported this from React DOM / client. So basically, what happened in the background is, if you remember, whenever we were trying to create, I'm showing this to you again, okay? Whenever you're trying to create this application, right? So we ran one command called npx create react app, right? So let me show that sample react 2. I'm creating one more folder here just to make it more easy for you. Open it. So look at this in slow motion. Okay. You need to understand clearly key what exactly is running, where all this React DOM came from. So I'm in my terminal, npx create react app. Let's say I'm creating one to-do list app. Okay, I gave the app name here. This is the syntax. Acha, naming restrictions. Okay. So there are some naming restrictions that it got. You should not use camel case. So if you see this line, installing React DOM, React scripts with CRA template. So your runner, your npx runner, what? So in the last class we discussed, runner is something which executes the scripts in a sequential manner. You just need to give the commands. That's it. It understands what it needs to do. npm is different again. So it brings all these packages together, downloads it from your npm repository, and then creates this whole structure. You don't need to sit and create this whole structure. That is the what is the library that is doing all this. It is basically bringing, it is like a party host. It brings everyone together. React is the one of the invitee. React DOM is an invitee. Likewise, you may ask what all packages are there, what all libraries these people are using. If you want to understand it, you need to go to package.json here. Now, what is this package.json? JSON we already talked about before. It is a structure where you try to represent some information. So if you see here, you have name of the application, my app, version of this is a default version that you're giving, private, yes. Dependencies. So dependencies means what all libraries are getting used here. So I have this testing library. We'll come to it. We'll try to understand what is this testing. This is used, this is for unit testing your code or testing your code. And again, you have React. Likewise, you have React DOM, React scripts. So these are all the libraries and the corresponding versions that you have. Okay. And then you have scripts. It all automatically generates the script. If you want to change the script, you can change these scripts. So npm, if you observe, in order to start the application, I used npm start. So whenever you run npm start, what happens? This script gets executed. It starts your application. React scripts is another library which helps you to run the application and open the HTML page. It makes the application active. Likewise, build. What is this building? We will come to that. Testing the application, ejecting it, likewise. ESLint, yeah, this is little important here. ESLint. There is a concept called linting. Okay. So if you remember in our previous classes, we talked about versions of JavaScript, various different versions of JavaScript. Okay. So what exactly this lint is, and why is it called ESLint? Because if you observe, ECMAScript is the one which is governing the versions of JavaScript and the features of JavaScript. So what it does is, if you are doing any mistakes, you know, any linting mistakes, or the way you are writing the code, ESLint will be, or especially this is a library again. If you see it, you can install it by using npm init ESLint config. So basically what you can do is it fixes the problems in your code. It automatically, because see, we are talking about scalability here. We are talking about some 10,000 lines of code or 1 lakh lines of code or even more. So you can't go and fix the code, or you can't invest your time on fixing small syntaxes or small corrections of your code. So ESLint is one which basically helps you to, or helps you to fix the problems of syntaxes majorly. Okay, we will come to this ESLint. We'll look at this practically. So create React app also gave you this ESLint config. Okay. Likewise, you have yeah, this browsers list, production and all it. Browser, this is browser compatibility. So in package.json, you see everything. This is like the index page of your application. And then we are here. Now come back to this. So React DOM, if you observe, where does this React DOM came from? It is a library. Okay. Now see, one blind rule that you need to follow always is, whenever you see a new word, you need to understand where is it coming from. If you saw a new function, which library does this function belong to is the question. Okay. So I'll just show you what is this React DOM. This is very important. So if you observe in our previous discussion, we talked about setting this package. If you see, or I just threw a word to you, we are combining HTML and JS, right? This combination. But to give my HTML and JS page, or a very static or a simple HTML is nothing, right? To give this some extra power, what we need to do is, you need to bring React to it, or the library that this powerful React to it. So the linkage between, or the bridge between this HTML, and there is a reason why they used DOM. I never mentioned this word DOM. DOM is nothing but document object model, which is nothing but your HTML. Okay. So React DOM, what does it do is, it just combines or bridges here. So you have this HTML, right? Your HTML is having a div tag, div root this. This is a HTML page. Somewhere here, you imported, or you have your React library, React.js ka library I have sitting somewhere. So what you need to do is, this React DOM will link you to, and the output is your React app. Now let us understand this, in your code. Okay. So if you come here, React DOM.create root, what is it doing is, now let's go back to this. This is a function, right? Create root. This is a function. So if you go to React DOM, this is the documentation of your React DOM. Just search for this, create root. Where is this create router? Create. Create router, create element. 1 second. So React DOM slash client. Okay. See here. It does take the DOM node and it basically creates, see, it creates a root and it is picking the root or the element which document.get element by id. Which function is this? This is a basic JavaScript function. So it is taking your division. Okay. It is creating a root or the starting point of your HTML. Basically, what is it trying to do is it is saying create one variable called root, and that variable would relate to, or it is nothing but the HTML that you have on your index.html. Okay, so what is happening in the background is this create root function directly fetches your index.html, brings your root division, and then attaches it here. See, here it is getting attached. Root.render app. Now, what is this app? We will see. If you observe, this looks like HTML again. So this is the notation of the component. This is how you represent a component. Okay. So now where is this app again? If you observe line number 4, you're importing this app from ./app means ./app means what? App is a file. So which is nothing but your JS file. If you go to app, see here, this is very important. You have a simple function, a small function. It's a JavaScript function again, no confusion, right? JavaScript function. And this function is returning something. And what is it returning? It is returning a simple HTML. Okay. We'll dig deeper, don't worry. Try to understand the connection. I have index.html. I have the root. I have my this create root. And then what I did was I'm rendering the app component or this component that is imported. Okay, for now you may not get used to the terminology component. Let us just say it as a you're rendering or you're attaching some JS file. But if you go to the JS file, what is it returning? It is not returning any value, or it is not giving you back any function or anything. It is returning you some HTML. Okay, now what happens is this HTML gets rendered. See, where is it getting rendered? Where is this being called? It is being called in my index.js here. So in other words, what happens is, see, this app would be replaced. I mean, in the runtime, I'm talking about runtime. I'll show you also how this is going to reflect. So this entire HTML from app.js, I'm copying it. What happens is it gets attached in the root element. So this is how it happens inside the root element. Now, if you execute this, what happens is, let's see, I'm undoing this code. See, I'm inspecting it. You know how to inspect it, right? See, inside my app, so sorry, inside my div root, I got a component called app. See, div class app. And it is here. Okay. So this notation is not in your JavaScript. So how is my application supporting this notation? Because you're using this function called .render, which is of your React DOMs function, which does the linkage between your root element or your root division and your app component. This is how, see, you did two things. You created a actually, of course, by it came by default, but here if you see, I have a component called app.js or a separate JavaScript file which is returning some HTML, and I got this into my index.js. Ultimately, it is getting rendered inside the root. Here there is nothing. It's just a simple division. So this is how the linkage happened. Now, what is the significance of, or what is the reason behind using the word app? Is because, so this is my root file, or you can say the first ever component or the root component, you can say. Okay. So if you go into inside this component, there are a few notations that you need to understand here. Importing on the top, a function. This function is nothing but a component. The component that we were talking about a few minutes ago, these components that we are talking about. So this component is nothing but a JS component. Isn't it a JS function which is returning an HTML? So you basically brought together your JS and HTML and rendered it here. Okay, don't dig deeper into it. This code would be a little confusing. We'll come to that later. So I'm returning it. And if you observe, few syntax observations that you need to do here are, always the component name should start with a capital letter. And if you are returning some HTML directly, you need to normally in return, normally the function notation would be the curly braces, right? But if you are returning any HTML, you should be embedding this complete HTML inside your this parenthesis. So it is embedded inside my parenthesis. Okay. So this is my app component, and my app component is doing nothing. It is just returning the HTML. That's it. Okay. So if you look at the structure of how this is getting rendered, inside my root, I have the app. This is my React app. So here, this is the entry point, you can say, React app. And inside that app, I have a header. Inside that header, I have some division, some crazy stuff that I am doing here. Okay. So let me show you some simple examples. Okay. Let me just delete all this to make you guys understand even better. Okay, let me create a component and show you. Okay. Any questions so far?
No, Raymond. Good.
All right. So here what you have is, let us say inside my app component, I want to create a new component called first component or something like that. First component dot JS. Okay. And see, it is very simple. Component is a simple function, but name the component like this. You should have a proper name. First component, a function, and export default first component means what? Now this notation, the word export, this basically came from something called modules. There is a concept of modules in your JavaScript. So exporting this means what? Making this component or this function available for other JavaScript files to download or import there. If you don't write export, others cannot import it. And the reason why you're writing default is because if anyone calls this JavaScript file called first component.js, by default, export this. You might have some more functions also. Let's say I have function ABC, something like this. So if you write default, what happens is, though other functions exist, by default, render the or return the content which is written only inside the first component, but don't bother about any function. Let us say I want to export this abort controller also, for example. You can write it explicitly. Export let's say, for example, export default, you wrote it like this, and you wrote it export about controller. Now, what happens is, whenever someone directly calls this, by default, this will go back, or the only first component they can import. But if they want to import about controller, they can, but they need to mention this name explicitly wherever you are importing. Okay, I will show you that notation, don't worry. But currently I'm using the default export. I'm deleting the stuff. Okay. And what I'm saying is this should return a simple h1 tag, and this is first component. Simple HTML, nothing complex here. Okay. And then in the app.js, I'm saying import first component from first. Actually, there are few code fillets. You'll get these suggestions. So it's a cakewalk. Now see, I imported the first component. Okay. And I deleted the complete HTML over there. See, now my page is empty. There is nothing. There is nothing because I deleted the HTML inside my app.js. But see, I imported it, but I didn't include in my HTML. Okay. So now how do you say that? You need to say na ki, see, first component is giving some HTML. Where should I render it? That location you need to give, or the address you write on your career or whatever. So the address where it should get downloaded or get attached is inside my app.js. I should write, or here, this is how I'm writing it here. This is the notation to include your component. Okay. This notation is important again. And this component name should match here. It should match. Now see, first component. If you inspect it, my first component is inside app is inside root. Likewise, if you want to create a second component, you can do that. Okay. Now let's say, see, in my first component, I have, I declared some variable. Okay. I'm writing const name is equal to Kohli, for example. First component, this component belongs to, let's say you write name here. So this is your JSX. Okay. So if you see how it is getting rendered, see, this is what is happening in the background. Let's connect it with our diagram here. You have your root. You have your React DOM connected your root and this with a simple, with a very simple notation. And what does it say is, sorry. And what does it say is, it renders this, no? So now here what's happening is,
So basically, we are taking hold of the root, and we are passing on the components, whatever we have created, to uh, the root.
correct. Now see. So your React DOM connected your React. It gave all the powers of React.js to your HTML. This is a very simple HTML page. This is very innocent. It doesn't know anything. Now React DOM gave that power to it. Then what you're doing is you created some app component, correct? You attached it. This attachment you got to know. And then to this app, I created first component. Likewise, second component, third component, endless. You can create any number of components that you want. Okay. Again, simplifying it, index.html, a simple HTML file. In this HTML file, in the div root, you have app.js, app.js or JSX. You can create it with JS or JSX or TSX, anything. App.js. And then you attach, you can embed any number of components inside this. Components means what again? Chunks of or packages of JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Okay, this is the structure. Component 1, component 2, 3, 4, 5.
JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, right?
Yes. So, because see here, you already looked at the code now. So here, what are we doing? This is HTML.
Correct. Yeah.
This is my JavaScript. And inside my HTML, I'm writing JavaScript again. If you want to write CSS, you can do it. You can write CSS here. So,
The styling part, right?
yep. So you can transform, basically what you did was in a single component file, you transformed your HTML more powerful. Your HTML became even more powerful now. Let us say you didn't import anything here. Let us say in your index.js. So index.js is the root for all your JavaScript files. Index.html is the root for all your HTML files. Likewise, app.css. It is a root for all your CSS files. HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Done. So these report web vital setup tests, even if this doesn't exist, that is fine. We will eventually learn what is the significance of all these other items. But we just focused on few files here. If you're able to understand the connection between these files, then you're good. The root file, the app file, the basic JS file, this app file goes into my JS, and this JS connects to my HTML. And this first component that you have, this gets connected to my app.js.
Yes. Yeah.
This is how the connection is established. Why to make this much confusing? Why to make this much complex? If you ask, if you are not doing it like this, then just imagine 10 persons working on the same file of code. It will be too confusing. You cannot decentralize the work. That is a major reason why they are dividing this into components. There are even more technical reasons also, but this is one of the major reasons. Okay. So if you come here, so that is how you can create any number of components that you want and embed these components into one another. And there are a few more things that we will need to understand here. By default, yeah, this package.json is very, very important. Okay. Few takeaways that I'm going to give here are you need to learn what is JSX. Try as many as examples you want. Try to understand conceptually. Just use ChatGPT and ask it a simple question. What does React DOM does in a simple language? It will even elaborate more. I already gave you the tip. It connects your HTML and React.js or the JavaScript file together. And then we already discussed this npx. Then you need to understand what is this package.json. Now, dependencies. Dependencies means what all libraries that my application is going to use, right? Because you're not going to, the major purpose of libraries is to reduce the time that you're going to invest on creating a functionality. By default, some functionality is created, you are going to reutilize it. So dependencies you have, and in these dependencies, you have something called dev dependencies.
Yeah, this is the one.
Dev dependencies means these dependencies doesn't bother about the end user or the functionality. These just bother about our developer or people like us, developers. This basically reduces our work. Okay, we will look at these dependencies as well. So takeaways from today's class are these items. Try to understand these concepts as much as possible, and also just go through this recording once again, so that you will get to know how the connection is being established. Even if you delete all the other files, doesn't matter. That is totally fine. Yeah, and look at this one also, robots.txt. This is much used in SEO and SEM. Robots dot basically, if you observe closely, it is giving you a framework. This create react app, it is giving you a framework. It gave you a framework actually. It is telling you ki, see, organize this code, your life is going to be good. It did some 80% of the work of setting up an application. Okay, so this is what create react app does. And if you look at this CSS, this is your global CSS, right? So you can create individual CSS also. And sometimes you can even do one thing. See, writing these many JS files, let's say I have some 1,000 components. Creating 1,000 JS files is going to be tough. So again, you can create, you can create a new folder here. You can create a component folder altogether. First component, I'm moving this into first component. See, it automatically changes my root here. First component slash first component.
So the
So
dependencies automatically, I mean the packages, right? As and when we change, it
yeah,
will.
there are few VS Code extensions that you can use. I basically install everything.
Oh,
So
okay.
these extensions will auto generate it. So yeah. Or you can even write it. I mean, if you are not using any extensions, no, it is not going to automatically reflect it. But now VS Code is doing it. So not,
Okay. Because in Java, usually when we
yeah,
also
you need to write it. Correct, correct. Hmm. That is the advantage of using these IDEs like VS Code, rather than using any conventional editor. You can save on time. Yeah. So you can create folders. You can create as many folders as you want. You can structure it. So yeah. So in the next session, what we will do is we will look at a already existing React application, little bigger one, so that you will get to know the essence of doing all this. You might not realize what is the problem it is going to solve completely, but once the application size increases, you will get to know. Okay, so just revise these concepts, and we'll meet again tomorrow, and then we'll continue. Okay.
yes. Raymond, what about the CSS, Raymond? What?
CSS, we will do it with React in together, because explaining CSS with JavaScript doesn't make sense. So anyway, it is the same everywhere. So we'll start with CSS as well. Yeah.
Because
Well,
I have no knowledge on CSS actually.
yes, yes, we'll
That's
cover it up. Yeah, yeah. Mm. All right then. Thank you.
thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.